with the passing of Paul Jones on the 18th, do you have any stories about him as a wrestler and as a manager?
Oh God. Actually as both. And I mean, sometimes the smart fans and potentially a few people in the locker room may have made fun of Paul in the latter days when he was a manager, because he was not that good of a manager, to be quite honest, because he had been a top wrestler. Part of his gimmick, number one, Paul Jones, especially when he was a heel, was that he was he was the cat's meow. I think one of the stories maybe in the Observer this week mentioned that he fancied himself a ladies' man on camera and off. He was always well groomed and etc. And I think he had a hard time as a manager trying to get other guys over besides himself, because he just really knew what had worked for him and what he had done, and it didn't translate. And he had gotten over as a babyface where he didn't have to be a great promo originally, and then he was such a strong babyface because he was a good-looking guy and more athletic in his younger days. And you can still, if you have the Mid-Atlantic films available at JimCornette.com, there's a lot of Paul Jones on there in the 70s when he was still in the ring, and he had a lot of fire. And he was a good-looking guy, and in those days he was a great territory babyface. And it didn't hurt that he and George Scott were real close, and he got a real good push to Carolinas to get established there. And then the Crockett's were always loyal to their lifers, so whether it was Klondike Bill or whoever. So Paul retired from wrestling because he had a bad back. Even as a manager, he had to wear a back brace when he would do certain things, and that's why he had that. I mean, he had a different body language in the ring anyway, but he had, as a manager, especially if he would do physical stuff, he moved in a kind of awkward, stiff way in some cases. That's because he had a bad back, right? So you couldn't hold it against him. But anyway, so he was a top guy as a wrestler. As a manager, especially when, to be honest, when he's on the same program with me and J.J. Dillon and then Heyman for a while, and he was going to be he had the Mr. Fuji award for the NWA locked up. But I remember he did a very not honorable. He did a very honorable but nice thing for me, basically. When they had it was December of 80. Oh, good God, 89. It was December of 88 because Dusty would have booked these. Who wouldn't have? When they had the bunkhouse stampedes in the cities, in several cities, Atlanta and Greensboro, and I think Columbia, South Carolina, maybe one or two others, had a manager's bunkhouse battle royal. Because all of a sudden, I guess Dusty realized, well, fuck, I've got so many managers, because think about this. It was Gary Hart, Paul Jones, J.J. Dillon, Paulie Dangerously, Oliver Humperdinck, me, and wait a minute, and that's only I think there may have been another one, but that's at least 7 right there, right? So we had managers' bunkhouse where we had to go in the ring, dressed as yard with the belts and the whole 9 yards. Well, so anyway, and I've got a couple of these on tape. People have seen it because I think it's on either it's the Midnight Express DVD that I used to sell till I haven't restocked yet on the website. But Gary Hart wore a weightlifting belt and blue jeans and cowboy boots, and I think JJ did too. Me and Heyman wore our sweatpants and a bunch of elbow and knee pads, right? I wore my same wrestling gimmick. I just happened to be a baby face because we had just done the original Midnight angle. And my nemesis is Paulie. So I'm a baby face, and Humperdinck was with Bam Bam Bigelow. So he's a baby face. So you got 5 heel managers and 2 baby faces, and Humperdinck at this time was nearly immobile because, he wasn't a physical guy to begin with, and he was nearly immobile and with the physique and everything. So basically it was going to be awkward. But the first that me and Heyman went over in the corner and tried to, keep ourselves busy. And then he insisted on this spot, which it'll look great. He stops me, has me down, and then he goes out and he climbs to the top like he's going to jump off on me, and I'm supposed to nail him in the chin, and he's going to take a bump to the floor. I said, Paul, let me just I'll dump you and dump you easy, right? Because I got to be the one to eliminate him. I'll dump you easy another way. No, I'm going to do this. I think he'd seen Curt Hennig do it, right? So as I recall, and I have this on tape somewhere, but he fucking stops me, and he fucking does whatever to me, and he goes out, and when he's climbing, he never does stand up. He's bent over the top rope, holding onto the top rope while he's putting his feet on the second turnbuckle hook, and he's like leaned over this clutch to it. And I said, "Is that it?" All right, so I go and I hit him, and he very gently rolls to the right and hangs on until he realizes that he's in control of himself and kind of lands on the apron and rolls off to the floor. It was not a Curt Hennig bump, right? But as it come down in Atlanta in the Omni, I ended up eliminating JJ, and because I had to win it, because like I said, I'm really the only babyface. So JJ and Gary Hart beat me up, and then fight amongst themselves and have each other teeter, and I come from behind and do the big shove, right? That was in Atlanta in the Omni, and that was great too. I eliminate J.J. Dillon and Gary Hart in the middle of the ring in the Omni. But in Greensboro, because I guess of who Paul was and what he had meant to Greensboro, Dusty gives us a finish where everybody else gets eliminated somehow, and fucking I'm left with Paul. So all of a sudden in the Greensboro Coliseum, and I'm kind of selling from whatever's been done to me and whoever he dumped there. And then all of a sudden we look up, and there me and Paul Jones are squared off in the Greensboro Coliseum. Of course, this is 1988 instead of 1978, but it wouldn't have done me any good in 78 either. But so it was cool. He gets on me and gets some heat on me, and he drops some stiff knees, and I definitely felt he was there. But at the end of the thing, the finish was that he would nail me, and I would go out through the ropes to the floor, not over the top, where I would grab my racket and come back in. And since it's a bunkhouse match, anything's legal, and I'd whack him a few times. So anyway, Paul, he really turned it on. He got some heat on me, and then fucking nailed me out. And then when I rolled back in with the racket and whacked him in the back, he didn't see it coming. Oh, shit, he sold it. And he took 3 or 4 more whacks and went over the top rope. And it wasn't like 1978, but, you know, with the back brace and whole 9 yards, it wasn't that bad. And the place blew. I had beaten Paul Jones. I'd beaten a star there. And he obviously didn't have to he had to put me over some kind of way, but he could have obviously got it changed to something less active. But he wanted to, you know, the people, he knew that he was over with the people from those days. And even though it was against me, he was at least going to get a little work in. So I always appreciated that he did that for me.
What did you think when you had your Mid-Atlantic films converted and you got to see all those matches with him against Steamboat? You got to see really him as a babyface and as a heel in his prime.
Yeah, and honestly, as I said, he was more athletic than one would think from his manager days, and he had a lot of babyface fire. He still was not, to be quite honest, I don't know that he was on the level of the Flairs and Steamboats and Snukas and et cetera athletically that would come in right after him, but you could tell that he could run rings around some of the guys they had in the Carolinas in the early 70s. So I can see more of how he got over. You know, you can see those guys before they'd been on national television, because there was no national television, but before they had really been exposed in a lot of big time territories that came into the Carolinas in the late 70s. They were athletically ahead of the other guys, but at the same time, the other guys that had been there, the Valentines and the Wahoos and the Joneses and the, Sandy Scott, whoever, they were a little bit ahead on psychology yet. And you could see how much that these young guys learned from the late 70s to the mid 80s when they were the top guys in the business everywhere.
It's a shame that he was a really good wrestler, big star in Florida, big star in Mid-Atlantic, and so many people will just remember him dressed like Hitler with a stable of folks.
And I remember when he was doing that, the fucking it was going to be Paul Jones's Army, and that's not a groundbreaking, fucking thing for a manager to have a stable called an army in wrestling. And of course, then usually they adopt a military fatigue or uniform or something. Some of them are just in fatigue. Some of them want to be generals, whatever the fuck is. Everybody from Jerry Lawler to Big Bad John to Gary, everybody's had an army. But Paul had that mustache anyway, that trademark mustache that was thick and dark. And I mean, you know, Paul's hair was so dark that lightning bugs followed him around in the daytime. I'm not sure it was all natural, but it was very dark hair. And you could see that mustache from a mile away. And what he started doing over a period of, I don't know how long it took him, but he slowly started fucking taking a little bit off each end of that mustache. And he got away with it for a long time because everybody was used to Paul having a mustache. And then all of a sudden they said, well, he looks like fucking Hitler. And then they said, no, I think he may have shoe polished some ends back on it for a while before he could grow everything back. It looked like fucking Groucho Marx out there in a goddamn army outfit.